Actually, let's start with Congress. As you take a look at the Congress, this is going to be the big chapter on the final. And obviously, it's just going to take 2 hours on Thursday, this time, regular class time, this room, so there should be no issues as far as that's concerned. Do y'all have any questions about any of the terms of the Congress?
All of them.
Okay, fire away. We got 1 hour, so we'll go until 5 after. Go ahead, 3-2. Racial gerrymandering. You remember what racial gerrymandering was? Go ahead, Patrick.
When they broke up congressional jurisdictions because of race, like so they put Democrats that are black or black Democrats in one, and then the rest be Republican white people.
What is Go ahead.
Wait, what do you want me to answer?
Go. What is gerrymandering in general, first of all?
That's when you district in a certain way with a political intention in mind.
Okay, when you draw a voting district so that when you think about it, it's going to benefit a particular political party. So if you draw districts and you draw them so that if there's 10 districts, 7 of them have a Democratic majority, you're kind of cheating when you think about it, especially if there's not 70% of the state that's Democrat. Well, racial gerrymandering is kind of doing the same thing, except instead of using political party, you're basically cheating based on racial groups. And when you think about it, I gave you 2 examples, one from Alabama and one from North Carolina, that dealt specifically with racial gerrymandering. When you racially gerrymander, how are you cheating when you think about it? Anybody?
Getting a minority into the Congress?
What's that?
You're getting a minority into Congress?
Yeah, you're basically drawing a district that's going to be a majority minority district, which means there's going to be, for example, if you create a majority black district, logically speaking, what do you think that the majority black district is going to elect?
Oh my god.
What's that? A black candidate, and that's what they did. So the North Carolina example was that they wanted to create majority minority districts. They wanted to improve black representation in Congress. No problems with any of this. And then when they had done this, was it legal?
No.
Why?
She said no.
What do you mean? Why in North Carolina was it obvious?
Because they were just sort of squiggling around.
Squiggling around.
It looked like they were trying to.
What did the district look like? Do you remember what the district was?
It looked
Like
alligator?
like really
It
skinny.
looked like what?
Like a claws, like
An alligator?
Like
What in the claws and alligators?
Sound-
That was just gerrymandering. Looked like the salamander.
Shark fin? Shark fin?
A fin, yeah. If you
Yeah.
remember in North Carolina, it was the I-85 district. It was the district that I said if they drove down the road with both of their doors open, it would hit and kill almost everybody in the district because it looked a little something like this, if you remember. And when they took a look at it, they said if race is going to be the primary factor, if race is going to be the primary factor in drawing a district, they said it's immediately going to be unconstitutional. So with this in mind, if you drew Carolina, and Carolina looked a little something like this, and you had all of these districts around here, and when you think about it, almost all of them look about the same until you get to the cheating one. And they said it looks like you're trying to cheat in this instance. Now, if this would have been a majority-minority district, that would have been fine because it looked like all the other ones. But it looked like they were trying to create it, and that's what struck it down. What was the Alabama example? Because North Carolina, they were trying to help people get into office. They were trying to empower black voters. What was the difference with Alabama?
97% white?
Yeah, it was. It was that 26-sided voting district in Alabama that they drew that was 97% white. And in this, basically they drew the lines of the district so that the black voters were going to be living outside of the city limits. They could not vote in the city election. Supreme Court took a look at it, 26-sided voting district, and they said, can't do it because if the primary factor is going to be race, then that's not going to be allowed. If you draw a voting district that is 97% white or 97% black and it looks like all the other districts, that's not illegal because it looks like all the other districts. You just drew it the way that it needed to be drawn. If you start coming up with crazy shapes, they're going to strike it down almost every time. Go ahead, Patrick.
Hotline.
Don't worry about hotline. Take off hotline. What others? Yes.
Characteristics of the house.
What are the characteristics of the house? Go ahead.
I think it would be like 25
25 is the minimum age.
You have to have been a resident for 7 years.
7-year resident minimum, yes.
There's like 475.
435 House members. And how long is the term?
2 years.
2 years. Now, this is the basic constitutional part of Article 1 that deals with, when you think about it, deals with characteristics of the House. What about the Senate?
Senate,
How old?
30.
Minimum of 30 years old.
They're in office for 6 years.
6-year terms.
They have to be a resident, and they have to,
How long for a resident? Minimum of 9 years, yes. And there's how many senators?
2 per state.
2 per state, so 100. Yeah, okay, understand, this is the basic differences between the House and the Senate. There are a number of differences that we talked about. Yeah, no, 6-year term. Okay, so when you think about this, when you look at this, understand these are the characteristics of House and Senate, but what are some of the different powers or the differences between how House and Senate work?
House creates laws and approves of it. I mean,
Well, both of them create and approve. Can you give me some example? Go ahead.
House is revenue bills, but Senate can still.
What do you mean by revenue bills?
They create, no, they create, and then Senate can negotiate with them.
All revenue bills must begin in the House of Representatives, yes. Now, the Senate can actually negotiate and change them, so they're gonna have input, but they all begin in the House. Why do they all begin in the House?
Because they relate more to the people.
And the people, since they relate more to the people, they wanted the House dealing with the money issues, makes perfect sense. What are the 2 examples that I've given you of Senate powers that actually the House can't touch? Go ahead.
Treaty and appointments.
Treaty and appointment power.
Yeah.
So how does the treaty power work, or the appointment power?
I just know that the House, they can't negotiate with that, right?
If the president wants to nominate like a Supreme Court justice, the only body that the president has to go to is the Senate. If the president is negotiating a treaty, or the executive branch is negotiating a treaty abroad, they only have to get approval from the Senate. The House has no role in this. What about impeachment? How is it different in terms of impeachment? Go ahead.
The houses are the ones that elect to do the impeachment, and then
And what does impeachment exactly mean?
it's like to put on trial or remove from office.
So big, well, put on trial, there's a real easy way of saying it. What's that? Charge. Yeah, when you impeach, and what kind of vote does it take in the House?
3/5.
Simple majority. With a simple majority in the House, you can charge someone of a crime or high crime or misdemeanor. Now, with this said, what is the Senate's role if the House charges?
They actually do the impeachment themselves, so they vote.
Well, now the House impeached.
Well, no, they stand over the actual hearings.
Stand over the hearings.
I don't know how to describe it. They're the ones, they do the actual.
They actually, zoom in on him, they actually do the trial. They try the impeachment. So with this in mind, the Senate is gonna be the one, that was really kind of weird, wasn't it? Yeah, the Senate is the one that's actually gonna determine the innocence or guilt. And in the Senate, you need the significant majority in order to be able to convict. Do you remember the 2 presidents that have been impeached?
it's not Nixon.
It's not Nixon. Johnson, Andrew Johnson, and William Jefferson Clinton. Yes, both of them were impeached, but neither were convicted. When you look at this, if I give you a question, and I almost have to, with differences between the House and the Senate, I mean, you can give me the age and the term and things like this, but if it's a big point question, it would probably be a good idea to give me some differences that you can explain, and some of the powers that they use are good examples of this. Something else is dealing with the elections. When they have an election for the House every 2 years, how many of the House members are up for re-election? Okay, I have a 1/3 back there of the House. All of them are, because the House is actually the most responsive to the will of the people. Every 2 years, how much of the Senate is actually up for re-election? I have a 1/3 back there. Can you try and lower the blind so we can film that today? Yeah, make sure you zoom in on Ramona. Okay, these are good examples of things. What other questions have you got? Yes?
Can you go over the acts real quick?
The acts. What does Article 1, Section 8 do? Article 1, Section 8 tells us something about Congress. Article 1, Section 9 tells us something else about Congress. What is it that Article 1, Section 8 or Article 1, Section 9 tell us? What's that? Article 1, Section 8 deals with the powers of Congress. You're right. And some of the terms that we had used in there, we had used like the express powers. We had used things in there like the elastic clause and things like this. Don't worry about those so much. But when it says Congress has the power to declare war, you find that in Article 1, Section 8. If it says Congress has the power to coin money, Article 1, Section 8. What is it, Tadala, that you see in Article 1, Section 9? Limits on power. So Article 1, Section 8 deals with powers. Article 1, Section 9 deals with limits on these powers. And Article 1, Section 9 mentions bill of attainder and ex post facto law. So what's the difference between a bill of attainder and what is an ex post facto law? Go ahead.
Bill of attainder is when you make a law that, you pass a law that, that would convict somebody.
Bill of attainder is when you pass a law. Who passes the law?
Congress.
The legislature. When the legislature passes a law that declares somebody guilty, or it could declare them innocent, this is known as a bill of attainder. Why would they ban that?
Because that would be violating separation of powers, wouldn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, because the Congress isn't the one that decides if somebody's innocent or guilty.
That's actually a really good answer. That's not the one that I'm going to test you on, but that's a really good answer. The idea is that they don't allow this because it's a violation of your rights. When you think about it, if you get charged with something, you get to go to court, you have an attorney, maybe even you get a chance to present witnesses and testify. Well, if they're passing laws declaring you innocent or guilty, they're deciding this, and in fact, you don't get to say anything. And when you think about it, that's a violation of your due process rights. So yeah, that's really what it is. What's an ex post facto law?
If a law is created, like today, a person who broke the law like before can't be charged with the law that was just created.
An ex post facto law is a law that's a retroactive law. So you're right, if you pass it today, and today is the 19th, if you pass a law on November 19th, it should take effect on, at the earliest, November 20th, right? Well, if you pass a law on November 19th and you make it effective on October 19th, somebody would be breaking that law, but when they were doing what they did in the past, it wasn't illegal to do. And that's unconstitutional. Can you give me a good example of an ex post facto law that we talked about? Go ahead.
I don't know what we talked about. Give me an example.
Can you give me an example of one that we talked about? And we talked about it for a long time.
Oh, you mean the child molestation?
Go ahead, the child molestation. Go ahead, William.
Apparently they can't create a law that convicts them before the fact? I don't know.
They can't pass a law that offends them before the fact. This is actually dealing with protecting our kids. And this was the article, if you remember, that was talking about making convicted sex offenders move away from the schools. Now understand on this, they wanted to protect the kids. So if you were a convicted sex offender, they were going to require you to move away from the school or make sure that you lived a minimum distance away. Now, what was the problem? What made this an ex post facto law?
Set it for state after, before the fact?
If you had committed a sex offense 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you were still going to be required to move away from the school. And the idea was that, okay, we're trying to protect our kids, and this is an ex post facto law. You're going to be adding more punishment onto someone for something that when they did it, it was not going to be punished that way. That seems like a problem. Now, the trick on this is that if you try and protect the kids' rights, that sounds good. If you try and protect the sex offenders' rights, because, you know, they got rights too, they're free, they're not in prison anymore, it's going to look bad when you think about it in terms of elections and things like this. But that was, if you recall, a really good example of an ex post facto law. Take a look at that protecting your kids article. What other questions have y'all got?
What is the 17th Amendment?
What is the 17th Amendment?
What is the 17th Amendment?
We never really talked about it, so I don't know.
What was the 17th Amendment? Not everybody at once.
Can you give us a hint?
17th Amendment actually dealt with direct election of United States senators by popular vote. So, yeah, that's one of the questions. Make sure that you take a good look at those. What other questions have you got from the terms?
Hey, go back.
Franklin?
Go back.
I didn't really get that.
It's on film, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
What other questions have you got from the terms?
Franklin?